the monthly figures for June showed a 1.4% increase in dwelling values across the capital cities. So keeping in mind we saw a 1.9% fall in May, so most of that 1.4% increase is a bit of a correction from the previous month. Keeping in mind though, the June quarterly figures now are down 0.2%, and we have been seeing an ongoing tailoring in the quarterly rate of capital gain across Australia. It peaked in August last year at 4%, and we are now seeing capital gains across the combined capital city index starting to move back to what you might describe as a more sustainable level of growth. Yeah, I think the marketplaces that have already demonstrated they've moved through the peak would be Canberra and Perth. Perth market peaked out about December last year in terms of the peak growth rate. So we have been seeing growth rates already coming down and transaction volumes are coming down. Canberra is also looking like a marketplace that's moved through the peak of the cycle. Confidence is a big issue in Canberra after the federal government announcement and more job shedding in the wings. Rental markets are pretty much stalled there as well. I think the markets that are probably stabilising now would be Sydney and Melbourne. Compression of rental yields is a big part there, where investment yields for a typical Melbourne house, for example, is about 3.4% gross. Sydney's a little bit better than that, but not much better. The markets to watch, I think, are probably Brisbane. We're seeing some momentum gather in Brisbane now. Values are up about 7% the last 12 months, and we're seeing transaction levels rising. Rental yields are much healthier. Hobart's also showing some upwards trends. Adelaide as well, but still some uncertainty around the Adelaide marketplace due to the reliance on manufacturing in that market. There are headwinds for Sydney. Most of that will come from just affordability barriers in the marketplace. So we've got a median house price in Sydney that's $800,000 plus. We'll probably see more and more of a trend towards medium to high density style of housing as a preference for first home buyers and general workers as well, or general wage earners, because that's simply where the affordable stock is. To buy a detached house in Sydney is relatively expensive now. It's always hard to predict where interest rates are going, but based on the current data flows and consensus across the economic community, as well as the ASX futures market on the cash rate, it looks like next year sometime is when we'll start to see rates lifting. So that low rate environment, that low interest rate environment should support some demand in the housing market. When we start to see rates lift, I think the fact that Australian mortgage holders are going to be quite sensitive to the cost of debt, that will probably send a pretty clear message that the growth cycle in the Australian housing market is done and dusted. It's a hard one for starters because the Foreign Investment Review Board doesn't collect a great deal of data around foreign investment. So we have some aggregated data that's not very timely. So when we look at that set of FIRB data and we compare it with our own data, we're looking at transactional, nationally, foreign buyers comprise around 3 to 5% of all transactions. From a value perspective, like a gross value of all sales, compared with FIRB approvals, we're looking at a higher proportion of foreign investment. It's at around about 10%, which suggests to me foreigners are generally targeting a more expensive price point in the Australian marketplace. The other thing about foreign investing is when you start to drill it down geographically, you can see that Melbourne and Sydney are by far the epicenters of foreign investment. So once again, from a transactional perspective, we're seeing more than 10% of Melbourne transactions would be to foreign buyers based on the approvals data from FIRB. But from a valuation perspective, it's getting close to a quarter, right? So we're really seeing Melbourne, particularly off the plan apartment sales and the premium side of the housing market, very attractive to foreign buyers in that area.